It's 2021. America's government is sort of collapsing, and humanity collectively holds its breath, waiting for an end to the pandemic. So really, there's no better time to buy a Nintendo Wii, right? Naturally, we here at The Gamer are thinking what you're thinking. We've got Wii brain as bad as anybody else. So today we're gonna answer the question, should you buy a Wii in 2021? All those The Gamer stands out there will remember we've covered other consoles like the PS3 and PS Vita, and whether or not you should pick one up today. This video is going to be a little different, because there exists a wonderfully powerful and robust GameCube and Wii emulator, Dolphin. The Vita and the PS3 don't really have emulators at that level, so to buy a Wii in 2021 can be a complicated proposition that ultimately depends on who you are and what you want. Strap in because we're diving into that complexity now to finally answer the question we've all been asking, should you buy a Wii in 2021? The Nintendo Wii released back in 2006 as part of the 7th generation of home consoles. This was Nintendo's first major console release since the GameCube in 2001. But the Wii wasn't much more powerful than the GameCube in terms of its hardware, and the Wii was miles behind the Xbox 360 and the PS3. What the Wii did have was its totally new way of playing games, by way of the Wii Remote. Plus, the original Wii could play all of your GameCube games through backwards compatibility, though this feature was phased out of later revisions of the console. While it might not sound like much joylessly listed as a series of facts, the Wii was an unbelievable smash success that dominated the market, selling over 100 million consoles, which is significantly more than either the lifetime sales of the PS3 or the 360. However, most of its success came from its novelty factor and less so from legendary games. The most successful games on the Wii are, as you would expect, the usual Nintendo fanfare. Your Marios, your Smash Bros, your Zeldas, all of the franchises and games you would expect, except built from the ground up around the idea of motion controls. If motion controls appeal to you, there's a lot of games to love. But what's less lovable is the massive library of third-party games that were often demakes, or pared-down games with fewer features and simpler graphics, and tacked-on motion control mechanics. Looking back as a now-defunct device, the Wii certainly has fewer must-play games than other consoles of the time, but that is far from saying it doesn't have a library of classics. When the Wii launched, it retailed for a mere $249.99, which was much less than the asking price of the Xbox 360 and PS3. In the context of the hardware, though, the price point makes sense. With internals not much more impressive than the 5-year-old GameCube, selling the Wii as a premium competitor to the 360 or PS3 would have been a recipe for disappointment. Today, Wiis are cheaper than ever, likely because of the truly extraordinary number of them manufactured and sold. eBay is usually the most reliable seller today, and you can pick up an older Wii model, usually advertised as GameCube compatible, or a newer Wii model, or even Wiis with custom firmware and homebrew apps pre-installed. The condition of the consoles you'll find is usually good, if pre-owned, and price regardless of specific Wii model tends to hover around $100. Though, if you're looking for a sweet bundle or find a great deal, you may end up paying a little more or less. Wii games, too, are everywhere, so they won't be too much of an issue locating. Traditional brick-and-mortar places like GameStop are likely to have Wii games around, but for pre-owned stuff, we generally recommend eBay. GameStop prices for major Wii releases, even pre-owned like Mario Party or Super Mario Bros., can still be steep today. How much of a deal you can get on a game will definitely vary based on the game's popularity, but you should almost always be able to find games significantly cheaper than they retailed for originally.
Other breaking news. Water. Wet.
Once a console has more than a few years of life behind it, its homebrew scene tends to open up. The most popular thing to do with homebrew tends to be emulation, allowing you to play many more games on your console than you otherwise could. Other popular reasons for installing homebrew on your console are to rip your games, store them on a hard drive, use media players, file explorers, and install custom apps as well as mods to your games. All of this is entirely possible on Wii, and the process is not at all involved. Depending on your Wii, following along with the popular Wii.guide site through the Nintendo Wii modding process requires at most an SD card, flash drive, and computer. Ultimately though, while cool to add more functionality to something you own, the state of Wii Homebrew doesn't offer the widest compatibility with emulators. Emulation on the Wii doesn't get more advanced than the Nintendo 64 or Sony PlayStation, but that doesn't mean the Wii isn't totally capable of playing your favorites from the NES or SNES era and the like. In short, homebrew is a cool thing you do with your Wii, but it's probably not going to blow your mind either way. If you're really into console modding and emulation, there are better options. But if you've got a Wii, it's, as they say, Free real estate. While emulation on the Wii isn't the most interesting, emulating the Wii itself is quite interesting. The popular GameCube and Wii emulator Dolphin is capable of extraordinary things, and you can download this free application for yourself and play it on your computer with hardware you already have. Dolphin lets users play games regardless of region, run tool-assisted speedruns, cheat, and map GameCube controllers and Wii remotes to traditional PC controllers. Plus, actual Wii remotes and GameCube controllers are supported too, as well as controller expansions. Dolphin also comes packed with multiplayer, both emulated local multiplayer and Nintendo Wi-Fi multiplayer. The major draw of Dolphin is often in its graphical improvements though. Dolphin allows you to run games at whatever resolution you like, as well as use custom higher resolution texture packs. And seeing a Wii classic running at 4K 60 FPS with high-res textures is an absolute sight to behold. Higher resolutions allow for much more detail to come through, and even lower resolution textures can come alive at higher resolutions. What you can do with Dolphin is pretty legendary and extremely flexible, but it may take you some time to get it running smoothly on your particular setup. And if you're a gaming purist, this kind of experience can be far removed from playing the original game on its intended console, if that sort of thing matters to you. So, should you buy a Wii in 2021? The first question you have to ask yourself is if you like the idea of motion controls. Because if you or your friends and family do, and you happen to be a Nintendo fan, a Wii is not expensive and can be countless hours of fun. All the familiar Nintendo games are there on Wii, so whether you're playing alone or with friends, there will be loads to do. If you're in it more for the games themselves, and you aren't a huge fan of motion controls, the flexibility of an emulator like Dolphin will let you play games however you like on your normal setup at much higher fidelities. When the Wii swept the world, people generally fell into two camps, and that's still true today. If you're in it for the sheer entertainment value of it and want a cool new toy, the Wii still does that really well, and it's cheaper than ever. If you're just a gamer wanting to play more great games, an emulator might be your best bet if you have a decent enough rig. Though Wiis are not expensive, depending on what condition you're willing to accept and where you look, you might find one for next to nothing out there. If you got an next-gen console-sized hole in your heart, a Wii won't break the bank, and it'll be fun. If you're not sure if an actual Wii is worth the money, consider how faulty our memories can be. Games that looked amazing a decade ago might let you down today, if for no other reason than resolution and frame rate. Being able to play old games, especially ones locked to a singular platform, in unlocked resolutions and frame rates is an absolute treat.
The House of Mario's cute little handheld has sold over 150 million units since it hit shelves in 2004. It was loved and adored back then, but could that love extend to today? We're going to talk about why the sweet 16th anniversary of the Nintendo DS could be the perfect time to get one.
Thank you, Mario!
Owning a piece of the past is an international pastime for good reason. It's fun to pick up old things and wonder and imagine how much work and inspiration went into their creation and how revolutionary certain design features were back in the day. 2 screens and a piece of tech isn't all that impressive in 2020, but everyone in 2004 looked at the Nintendo DS, aka Nintendo Dual Screen, like, why didn't I think of that? The heir to the Game Boy Advance, the DS's bottom 3-inch screen was a touchscreen, and both screens had a sweet backlight, which was also fat-shamed after the DS Lite came out, has an 8-hour battery life. Not too shabby for an early 2000s handheld. Any of you older watchers remember how fast Ghetto Blasters ran out of battery? Yeah, 20D batteries ain't cheap. Not then, not now.
D, not C, D.
Anyway, the DS has a calendar. It's fun to schedule your gaming meetings with it. It has Pick-to-Chat, the Zoom of 2004, and DS Download Play for game demos and samples. The Wi-Fi was also quite something at the time. This tech was a quantum leap from Game Boys. You did have to connect to other DSs using friend codes, so security was a little tight. If someone gave you their DS friend code, you knew they really liked you. Unfortunately, its servers are now disbanded. It has backwards compatibility that today's consoles should be taking notes about. You can play Game Boy Advance titles on it, expanding your library options by double. For some odd reason, though, it cannot play Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, even though their successor, the Game Boy Advance, can. But for the $50 or less you'll pay for it at a flea market, we don't think you can complain too much.
You're gonna pay now, you're gonna pay on layaway. How much?
And the region locking on the DS is not a thing, so you can play the weirdest Japanese titles money could buy on the project formerly known as Iris. The lighter, sleeker, brighter DS Lite is an even better buy with 12 hours of battery life. And things get incrementally better with the DSi, and you get a full extra inch of screen in the bigger and better DS XL. A console is only as good as its games, so this cutie patootie is great. For the platform gamer who loves the new school masterpieces like Cuphead, pay homage and tribute to some old school classics like these three great Sonic games: Sonic Rush Adventures, and Sonic Colors. The new Super Mario Bros. Breathed new life into the NES Classic. And for those looking to broaden their platform gaming horizons, there's Starfy, a Kirby derivative whose ultra-cute underwater adventures are a charming Mario and Sonic alternative. The ingeniously titled Nintendogs are wonderful for dog lovers too lazy to walk real-world dogs. Rubbing those virtual canines could ease the stress of even the most stressed-out gamer. That's better. Sometimes, when playing that game, you do end up feeling like Sam Rockwell's character in Seven Psychopaths.
Pa.
As their voice recognition software wasn't and isn't all that top-notch. And before kids were getting severely hurt playing Pokemon Go, there was the infinitely safer Pokemon game, Pokemon Platinum version, the 5-star improvement over Pokemon Silver version and Pokemon Pearl version. There are a lot of other Pokemon Gold mines on the DS well worth your time, like Pokemon Black, Pokemon White, Pokemon Black 2, and Pokemon White 2. And lest ye not forget Pokemon Heart Gold and Pokemon Soul Silver. Even though those last two sound like they should be Prince albums, they are Pokemon classics. Another set of games that never meant to cause you any sorrow and never meant to cause you any pain are the Final Fantasy RPGs FF3 and FF4. These are Capcom classics that you can play while waiting for them to finish Final Fantasy XVI.
Come, Joshua. Your father will be expecting us.
And for the truest of true role-playing game aficionados, you can't talk about RPGs without talking about Zelda. And no Zelda collection is complete without The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Anniversary Edition. The amount of endorphins this sound releases in my brain always refills several of my heart pieces. Oh yeah. For fans of the bizarre and lovers of the movie Being John Malkovich, there's Mario and Luigi, Bowser's Inside Story, where you get inhaled by Bowser and spend time deep inside your archenemy in order to battle a bigger tyrant named Fawful. If you're tired of dying every few seconds playing online in Call of Duty Modern Warfare,
Taking fire!
Take it back, and we mean way back, to the Call of Duty DS games where you can actually win sometimes. If you're looking for a true blue DS classic, there's Animal Crossing Wild World, a real garden of peace for really high-strung gamers. It's a place to go and get full chill, as nothing can truly get to you when you're riding with the captain. And finally, one of the rarest games of them all, which YouTuber Nick Robinson recently resurrected, the McDonald's DS game, which you can actually use to learn how to work at McD's restaurant, as it was an actual training tool the fast food chain used. Great for McDonald's lovers, rare game collectors, and the US president.
What's your secret?
It's not all sunshine and rainbows, though. For another kind of culinary artist who wants to have an experience that's the opposite of fun, you can play handheld games as Cory in the House, where you play as the teenage head chef of the White House and spend all your days looking for lemon sauce. Look, they can't all be gems, but with such a wide variety of games, that's bound to happen. But the good games trump the bad ones for this now almost classic console. Oh yeah, and for the rock gods out there, I almost forgot. There's Guitar Hero DS. That was amazing. The holidays are supposed to be a time of great joy and togetherness, but what the Hallmark movies don't show is that they're also a time of great stress. Sky-high expectations that are tough as nails to meet, and noise, noise, noise. See, the Grinch understands. Give yourself the gift that's entering its teenage years that can make the world go away with its historical appeal, vast game library, and its link to a not-so-overwhelming past. Sure, you could play Cyberpunk 2077 and accept all its bugs and flaws, but if you want to take a trip to the past and have a good time, the Nintendo DS is always up for it. And with some going as low as $10, hey, I've spent $10 on things that only lasted a few minutes, and afterwards, I felt pretty bummed. The DS could provide you with hours of joy for that same price. If you think of it like that, what have you got to lose?
9 years ago, in late 2011, the Nintendo Switch was but a glimmer in the eyes of Nintendo shareholders. But the reign of Sony's follow-up to the massively successful PlayStation Portable, the PlayStation Vita, was just beginning. For its time, the Vita did things no other portable gaming device in history had done. But what you might not know is that the PlayStation Vita is still worth a buy in 2020. Let's play Name That Console. Experience console-quality games on the go. Stay connected everywhere. Play online seamlessly. And stay in touch with all your friends. Or even play at home on your TV in higher fidelity with a more comfortable controller. Switch? No. The PlayStation Vita can do all this in 2020. Though the Vita isn't a great replacement for a Switch or even a 3DS, considering the many titles specific to their libraries, the Vita remains an impressive device with an excellent catalog of games that you can enjoy for cheap. If you've got some extra spending money because you couldn't get your hands on a PS5, Series X, or new graphics card, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to get into why you should buy a PS Vita in 2020. The PlayStation Vita came with nearly all the possible tech buzzword hardware features of its time. Front and back touchscreens, front and back cameras, both Wi-Fi and 3G on certain models, a built-in mic, a gyroscope and virtual compass, and even GPS on the 3G variants. What's more is that for the PlayStation 3/Xbox 360 era of gaming, which the Vita launched at the end of, the Vita was powerful enough to drive games at current generation console fidelity. The Nintendo Switch is much more powerful than the Vita, yes, but the Switch can't compete with PlayStation 4/Xbox One fidelity. If you look at a game like Killzone Mercenary on the Vita, and imagine that running at a higher resolution on a bigger screen, that's what a lot of Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 games look like. Practically speaking, not only does the Vita have a number of interesting hardware features, it has the raw compute power to drive relatively modern-looking games. Perhaps the biggest feature of the Vita was its screen, a pristine OLED panel, known for the best blacks in the screen business. The first run of PlayStation Vitas came packed with this gorgeous screen, and much praise was given to the device when it was first reviewed because of its screen. Even today in 2020, OLED screens aren't cheap, and they're usually relegated to the high end of televisions and mobile phones. Back in 2011, when the Vita launched, the Vita was one of the easiest ways to experience an OLED display, and that still holds true today. But it's only true if you buy a 1000 series Vita, the first series, because later revisions of the Vita replaced the OLED screen with an LCD screen to cut costs. The PlayStation Vita launched with an OLED screen, without 3G, and with Wi-Fi for $249.99. Today you can find Vitas for a lot less, but you may have to do a little digging if you want the best deal on a specific series. The launch line of Vitas, known as PCH 1000 or 1000 series Vitas, come with the OLED panel, while the 2000 series or the Slim line of Vitas has an LCD screen. On eBay today, you can find 1000 series Vitas between $100 and $200. Though, unless you pay a careful attention to an auction and get a little lucky, you'll likely find one closer to $200. Depending on where you live and what's around, you might be able to walk into a local GameStop and find a Vita for as little as $100. But your mileage here may vary. Unlike the PSP, the PlayStation Vita uses proprietary memory cards to store games on, so you can't just pop in any old micro SD card you have lying around. Sony claimed this was to make sure the Vita's storage was always fast enough, which they claimed they couldn't depend on third-party cards. This was very similar to Microsoft's explanation as to why their new Xbox Series consoles use proprietary storage cards. The Vita only comes with a gig of internal storage, so you will need one. These cards were expensive at launch, and they still aren't cheap. On eBay or your average reseller, you'll likely find 16GB cards for around $40, while the larger 64GB cards will run you over $100. Luckily, Vita games aren't nearly as large as games are today, so you can pretty easily get away with an 8GB or 16GB card and never have to worry too much about space, depending on how many games you plan to keep installed at once. The core thrust of the Vita's early marketing positioned it as a big-budget, AAA machine, but a machine that you could take on the go, and many of the system's best and most impressive games made good on this promise. Games like Killzone Mercenary, Uncharted Golden Abyss, the Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, and Persona 4 Golden all bring console-level experiences to the handheld. But the Vita's core library isn't made up of big-budget games at all. Many of the best games you can play on Vita are indie games like Gravity Rush, or simply smaller-scale games like Stardust on the Vita. A huge abundance of JRPGs and visual novels also found their way to the system. Some mobile games were also ported to the system, and some of these, like Papers, Please, are particularly well suited to the Vita. And though there may not be any AAA Vita games coming out in 2020, in 2020 and beyond there are smaller indie titles. If you decide to go down the rabbit hole of custom firmware and homebrew, or simply buy a hacked Vita off eBay, this will open up a whole nother world of play to you. There are a number of emulators working on Vita, which can in turn play tons of games. With a full controller-style layout of buttons as well as dual cameras and touchscreens, any number of games can work on the Vita's hardware, which is why the platform is still seeing some support today. If you're just looking to play at home, the Vita can remote play PS4 games. And with the 1000 series OLED screen, it's not a bad way to experience modern games the Vita couldn't run itself, nor could the Switch, in your bed or around the house. Even if you've owned a Vita, you may never have heard of the PlayStation TV, or even know how a PlayStation TV relates to the Vita. This is in part an indictment of Sony's marketing of the PlayStation TV, and an explanation as to why the product was short-lived and eventually discontinued in 2015 after its launch in 2013. The PlayStation TV is a Vita without a screen. You pair with a controller and connect to your TV like a traditional video game console. The PS TV plays most Vita games, though not all of them, and can even upscale them up to 1080i. The PS TV can also play many PSP games, PS1 classics, and PlayStation Mini games. The PS TV also accepts Vita game cards and Vita memory cards, which are what is used as a storage device, just like the Vita itself. By simply taking a game or a memory card out of your Vita and plugging it into your PS TV, you can play your Vita games on a big screen with either a DualShock 3 or a DualShock 4 controller. Plus, the PS TV even sports an Ethernet connection, which drastically improves streaming and downloading. In effect, the Vita can do what the Nintendo Switch does now. Plus, it comes backed up with Sony's online service and integrated into the PlayStation ecosystem. The catch with the PS TV today is that since the product was so short-lived, they can be hard to find. On eBay, PS TVs go for anywhere in between $100 and $200, which is about what you would pay for an actual Vita. But if you can find one for a reasonable price, it's the ultimate Vita accessory. Trophies have been around since the PlayStation 3 introduced them as a competitor to the Xbox 360's achievements. 2 generations later, trophies are still going strong, and now there are more trophy hunters out there than ever. However, one of the biggest issues with trophy hunting is that it can be tedious, and when you don't have all that much free time to begin with, sometimes it can be hard to ever manage to finish platinuming a game. Vita games support trophies too, so you can start earning your trophies wherever you have a couple minutes to spare, and the Vita is easy to bring with you anywhere. Plus, just like with other games you can look up trophy or achievement guides and roadmaps for, all of that holds true for Vita games. And games that see releases on other platforms that also arrive on Vita can make returning to a favorite more worthwhile, because you can earn trophies on the second go-around too. If you're a seasoned trophy hunter interested in portability, a PS TV, depending on the deal, and a DualShock 4 is a reasonably economical way to open yourself up to a whole new platform to earn trophies from the comfort of your own home, and still safely within the embrace of the PlayStation ecosystem.
Should you buy a PlayStation 3 in 2020? The PlayStation 5 is finally upon us, but there's a different Sony console that's been occupying my mind lately. See, nearly 14 years ago, Sony unleashed the PlayStation 3 on the world, and things were never the same again. Kind of. This thing was $600 at launch. Yikes, but at that price, you got a console that was HD capable. that could play Blu-ray discs, and that got such great, incredible exclusive titles such as Uncharted 2, The Last of Us, and by far the worst version of Sonic 06. Seriously though, it's a great console, but should you still buy one in 2020 if you haven't already? Well, I'm Jamie from The Gamer, and in today's buying guide we're going over hardware, software, and accessories to not only decide what the best PS3 setup is, but to decide if one is right for you. Development on the PS3 began back in 2001, shortly after the PS2 launched. It was first shown off to the public at E3 2005. That version sported both a silver color scheme and a boomerang-shaped controller, and people hated it. Not all was bad with that demo model though. Along with it came tech demos of both Metal Gear Solid 4 and an HD version of Final Fantasy VII. Goodness, it sure would be a shame if it took 15 years for anything to come of that FF7 demo. Anyways, the PS3 was also set to be the first game console to ever support HDMI out. This meant that, out of the box, games would be playable in HD. When the PS3 launched a year later in 2006, reception was mixed to say the least. Folks were impressed by how incredible the games looked, and Sony made a big deal out of the new tilt features on the 6-axis controller. The system could also double as a fancy new Blu-ray player, which was a big deal back in 2006. However, the $600 price tag and rumors of games being difficult to develop for it thanks to its advanced architecture made it have a slow initial uptake. This was also the same year that the Nintendo Wii was launched, and though that system was much less powerful, it only had a $250 price tag. That would help propel it to a large early sales lead. Granted, that $600 PS3 price tag was for a model with a 60GB hard drive. You could get one with only a 20GB hard drive for $100 less. The PS3 was an impressive piece of tech for the time though. I remember being much more impressed by the leap from PS2 games to PS3 games than I was by the later jump from PS3 games to PS4 games. In fact, I'd argue many titles released for the PS3 still look great today. The launch model of the PS3 is notable for being backwards compatible with both the PS2 and the original PS1. While every PS3 ever made is backwards compatible with PS1 discs, only certain PS3s released within the first few years after launch could play PS2 games. And even then, some of them were more compatible with PS2 games than others. Without going too far into details, if you see a PS3 that looks like a launch model, then it can play PS2 games as long as it has one of these model numbers. Launch model PS3s were also special because certain other operating systems could be installed onto them. Most notably, several Linux distros were known to run incredibly well on the PS3. However, this feature was also used to mod PS3s for piracy reasons, and Sony would take note. They would remove this feature from all later PS3 revisions. And then, likely just because Sony doesn't like people having nice things, they would patch it out using an update in 2010. Even though it wasn't a feature many folks use, a lot of people were outraged by this. This was a feature that they had felt was promised with their system, and that feature had been taken away. People were pissed on principle. There are also several known hardware issues with the launch PS3. While Sony never had anything that plagued their systems as bad as the red ring of death on the Xbox 360, some PS3 owners would eventually encounter the dreaded yellow light of death. There are also rumors of launch model PS3 disk drives being finicky, but oddly enough, I don't know anyone who ever had that issue. The only PS3 I ever had the disk drive fail on was actually the PS3 Slim I owned as a teenager. Speaking of which, after a slow first few years of sales, Sony decided to give the PS3 a sexy new redesign, release it at a new low price, and promote the hell out of it with a series of ads featuring Kevin Butler. Launched in 2009, the PS3 Slim was perhaps my favorite looking Sony console until the PS5 was unveiled. I don't know what it is about it, but it still looks weirdly modern to me, despite now being over a decade old. From my experiences as well, this is also the most common PS3 out there. By this point, the initial 6-axis controller had also been replaced with the superior DualShock 3. which was basically just the same dang thing as a PS2 controller, but wireless. It even had rumble support. This also came standard with pretty much every PS3 sold after that first year or so. The PS3 Slim may be the best looking PS3, but I'd argue the most reliable model is the final revision. This is the PS3 Super Slim, which was released in 2012. This was basically Sony's attempt to give the PS3 one last push before the PS4 came out, and it is very, very obviously cost reduced. The plastic used on it just feels cheaper than on the other models. There's a slide-out disc tray instead of a mechanical disc drive. It also looks oddly like a grill. Cheap as it feels, that disc tray revision makes it easily the most reliable PS3 out there, as discs just can't get stuck inside of it. For those who want to buy their games digitally, which is still an option as the online PlayStation Network store is still around, there is also a version of the Super Slim that comes standard with a 500GB internal hard drive, which is rather nice. That's also the exact model I've been showing off throughout this video. I got this for around $100 at EB Games a few years back, and it served me well. However, most major retailers don't sell these anymore, so if you're wanting a PS3 nowadays, your best bet is either visiting a mom and pop game store or just getting one off of eBay. But before you make that decision, do also know that hardware isn't the only thing to consider here. After all, what's a console without its games? The PS3 had some phenomenal defining titles. God of War 3, LA Noire, The Last of Us, Assassin's Creed 2, the Uncharted games, and even the likes of Wipeout Fury. All of those are incredible titles with a lot of fun on offer. All of those are also titles that were either PS3 exclusive or originally best known on the PS3. Yet, all of those are now titles that have all gotten ports to newer platforms. Tons of the great games that helped define the PS3 have since gotten ports to the PS4. While the PS3 versions are most definitely cheaper in most cases, if you're wanting more than just a cheap entry point into gaming, you'll be missing out on the best versions of them. Just look at LA Noire here. That thing is even on the Nintendo Switch now. Some of these upgraded versions even add in additional content. For example, sure, you could hunt down the PS3 version of Persona 5, but you'd be missing out on the extras added in Persona 5 Royale on PS4. Along with that, though online services are still available on the PS3, they're likely going to be wound down over the next few years. Online play is free, yes, but PS Plus members used to be able to get monthly free games on the PS3. Yeah, that ended a couple of years back. That's not to say there's no longer any great PS3 exclusives though. In fact, I have a holy trinity of sorts of games that are still only playable on PS3. The first of these is 3D Dot Game Heroes. This is basically the best Zelda game out there that isn't a Zelda game. It's an overhead adventure where you play as a blocky hero with a sword who goes on a great quest to save the kingdom from evil. You can fully customize your character to a ridiculous degree thanks to the built-in editor tool. You can even play as a tank if you want. Plus, the writing is witty and charming, and the level of polish is absolutely unreal. It's easily one of the most underrated games From Software has ever made, and it's a damn shame it's never seen a modern console port. Gran Turismo 5 is also one that I absolutely love, and though we've since gone both GT6 and GT Sport, I'd argue that this was the peak of the series so far. There are nearly 1,100 cars that are drivable here, with there being a variety of great tracks and even an editor that allows you to make your own. This is another one that is still only available on the PS3, and is still an absolute blast in 2020. Finally, I'd like to mention one of the most controversial games of that console generation, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. This was supposed to be Sony's answer to Super Smash Bros., and let me be the first to say that it just doesn't hold a candle to Smash. But at the same time, it's still a really enjoyable little party fighter that's especially fun with friends. Sure, it's missing the likes of Crash Bandicoot from its roster, and yeah, the version of Dante here is from the failed Devil May Cry reboot, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game at all. If the gameplay you're seeing here looks cool to you, maybe pick this one up either on PS3 or Vita. And if you're intrigued about the history of this title, then I'd absolutely recommend checking out the Golden Bolts documentary Smashed: What Happened to PlayStation All-Stars. While there aren't a ton of exclusives left on the PS3, there are still a crazy amount of games that can be enjoyed on it, exclusive or otherwise. As PS3 stuff is dirt cheap nowadays, I think this also makes it a prime entry point for aspiring game collectors. And if you fall into that category, definitely stay tuned as we dive into some weird PS3 accessories. As this is a buying guide, I figured we should end off by looking at 3 very odd PS3 accessories. The first and most obscure of these is the PS3 Play TV. Long story short, back when the PS3 launched, most people still watched TV via cable. In fact, the PS3 really didn't offer much in terms of streaming services until Netflix began to take off. Released in 2007 exclusively in Europe, the Play TV would let you record TV shows directly to your PS3's hard drive while you were playing games. There is a similar device released in Japan called the Torn, and honestly, I'm sure this was pretty neat at the time. Maybe it's just because I have childhood memories of TV shows being recorded to VHS tapes, but this seems like a very cool step in the transition from traditional TV to streaming. On the more ambitious end of the PS3 accessory spectrum is the PS3 3D display. Released in 2011 along with PS3 compatible 3D glasses, this was a gorgeous looking 24-inch monitor that would allow you to play PS3 games in cinema-esque 3D. It can also be used outside of 3D mode as just a standard gorgeous looking 1080p monitor, but 3D was the real selling point here. Sony was really pushing 3D hard for a good few years, and all sorts of games that have absolutely no business being in 3D had a 3D mode. Goodness, even Sonic Generations could be played in 3D. I think this was just an odd attempt to try to compete against the then new Nintendo 3DS, but really, it's not cool enough to be a major selling point for me. Finally, we need to talk about PlayStation Move. After the Wii waggled its way to success, both Sony and Microsoft tried to jump on the motion-controlled casual gaming bandwagon. Microsoft's attempt was the Kinect. The less said about that thing, the better. Sony's attempt was PS Move, and this was both technically a failure and technically a success. PS Move controllers are basically just Wiimotes with glowing balls on top. They're comfortable to hold, sure, but I think it's fair to say that if I want to play Wii Sports, I won't play Sony's much less charming Sports Champions, I'll just play Wii Sports. I think many folks feel the same, as PS Move didn't sell great and the PS Move exclusive games quickly found their ways into bargain bins everywhere. But that was not the end of PS Move. Years later, Sony would launch PlayStation VR for the PS4. And it just so happens that Sony's VR controllers were the PS Move controllers. They're literally the same exact controllers, and they're even compatible with both the PS3 and the PS4. In that sense, PS Move actually did manage to successfully find a niche. Really, none of these accessories are must-buys for any but the most diehard of PS3 fans. In my opinion, all you need to have fun with this system is a couple of controllers and a copy of any of the great games mentioned throughout this video. I think it's easy to see why I still love my PS3 over a decade later. I think it's no secret that I think the PS3 is a great console. But with everything we have just gone over in mind, we need to answer the question posed at the beginning of this video. Should you buy a PS3 in 2020? Let's be fair here. The PS5 is here and the PS4 is soon going to be on its way out. Stores such as GameStop overwhelmingly don't even sell PS3 games anymore, and as mentioned before, a lot of the great PS3 games out there have since gotten PS4 ports. If you want one nowadays, you'll have to turn to a place such as eBay or a local retro game store to get one. Most PS3 models will only run you about $70 to $90 US, and the majority of games are dirt cheap. If you have a PS4 or are getting a PS5, you can probably pass up on getting a PS3 unless you're a collector. But if you're a gamer on a budget, a PS3 would be a good investment, with hours of fun available for a pretty low price. Despite the lack of PS2 backwards compatibility, I'd say that the best model to get nowadays is the Super Slim. Yeah, it's also the ugliest PS3 model, but the non-mechanical disc tray means you won't have to worry about discs potentially getting stuck inside of it, and it can still play PS1 games as well. The PS3 is still a great console, and one that can provide hours upon hours of fun. On that note, will you be buying a PS3 in 2020? How about a PS4 or a PS5? Let us know down in the comments section below, and while you're at it, subscribe to The Gamer for more great content like this. I'm Jamie, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.